The courtroom smelled like fear and polished wood. But nobody expected a kid to break it wide open. 10-year-old Eli Carter stood at the witness stand, his sneakers barely touching the floor, about to unravel a lie so big it would choke the air out of everyone in the room. Eli's small hands gripped the stand's edge, knuckles pale against his brown skin. His mother, Marla Carter, sat 10 feet away, her face a mask of calm that cracked every time her son glanced at her. The jury watched, 12 pairs of eyes darting between the boy and the woman accused of a hate crime that had torn their small town apart. It was a case that had started with a brick through a window and ended with a community on the brink of war. Marla swore she was innocent. Eli, though, had a different story, one he'd kept buried until now. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Helen Voss, leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Eli, can you tell us what happened the night of June 12th? Eli's eyes flicked to his mother, then back to the judge. Mommy lied, he said, his voice small but sharp, slicing through the hum of the courtroom. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Marla's lawyer, a slick man named Greg Palmer, shot to his feet, but Judge Voss silenced him with a raised hand. Lied about what, son? Voss asked. Eli swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a stone in his throat. She said she didn't throw the brick, but she did. I saw her. The room went dead silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. Marla's mask shattered, her lips parted, her eyes wide with something between shock and betrayal. The jury shifted in their seats, pens frozen over notepads. Even the bailiff, a burly man who'd seen it all, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just a kid telling a story. This was a bomb going off. 6 months earlier, the town of Willow Creek had been a powder keg waiting for a spark. It was a place where the lines between black and white weren't just drawn, they were carved deep. The Carters, one of the few black families in town, had moved into a tidy ranch house on Maple Street, a mostly white neighborhood. Marla, a single mom, worked double shifts at the diner to keep Eli in school supplies and sneakers. They kept to themselves, but whispers followed them about their place, about property values. Then came the brick. It sailed through the front window of the Nguyen family's home, a Vietnamese couple who'd opened a grocery store downtown. Scrawled on the brick in red paint was a single word: leave. The Nguyen's, shaken but defiant, reported it to the police. Suspicion fell on Marla after a neighbor claimed to have seen her car near the Nguyen's house that night. Marla denied it, swearing she'd been home with Eli. The town split down the middle. Some saw Marla as a scapegoat, others as a symbol of everything wrong with outsiders. Protests flared outside the courthouse, signs reading "Justice for the Nguyen's," clashing with "Stop the Witch Hunt." Eli, caught in the crossfire, had stayed quiet. Until now. Tell us what you saw, Eli, Judge Voss said, her voice softer now, like she knew she was treading on fragile ground. Eli's eyes dropped to his hands, fingers twisting together. It was late. I was supposed to be in bed, but I heard the car start. I looked out my window and saw Mommy driving away. She came back real quick, maybe 10 minutes. When she got out, she was holding something. It looked heavy. She hid it in the garage. Palmer, Marla's lawyer, jumped up again. Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay, speculation. Overruled, Voss snapped. The boy's testifying to what he witnessed. Sit down, Mr. Palmer. Marla's hands trembled on the table, her composure unraveling. She leaned forward, whispering something to Palmer, but her eyes never left Eli. Was it guilt, fear, or the sting of her own son turning against her? Eli kept going, his voice gaining strength. The next day, the police came. Mommy told them she was home all night. She told me to say the same thing. She said if I didn't, They'd take me away from her. His voice cracked on the last word, and a tear slipped down his cheek. I didn't want to lie, but I was scared. The jury was riveted, some leaning so far forward they looked ready to fall out of their chairs. A woman in the back row dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The Nguyen's, sitting in the gallery, gripped each other's hands, their faces a mix of pain and hope. They'd endured months of harassment since the Brixlers spray-painted on their store, tires slashed in the night. They deserved answers. Judge Voss removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Eli, this is very serious. Are you sure about what you saw? Eli nodded, his jaw tight. I'm sure. And there's more. He hesitated, glancing at his mother again. Marla's face was a storm now, anger, fear, and something deeper, something like shame. She wasn't alone that night, Eli said. There was someone else in the car. The courtroom erupted. Voices overlapped. Reporters scribbled furiously, and the bailiff barked for order. Judge Voss slammed her gavel, the sound like a gunshot. Quiet, she roared. Eli, who was with your mother? Eli's voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried like thunder. Mr. Dawson. A collective intake of breath swept the room. Tom Dawson was Willow Creek's Golden Boy, a white real estate developer who'd loudly opposed newcomers moving into Maple Street. He'd been at every town hall meeting, railing about preserving the community. He'd even posted bail for Marla, claiming it was out of Christian charity. Now Eli was pointing the finger at him. Dawson, sitting in the gallery, went rigid. His face drained of color, and his hands clenched into fists. Marla's head dropped, her shoulders shaking. The truth was out, and it was uglier than anyone had imagined. The trial had started as a simple hate crime case, but Eli's words turned it into something bigger, a mirror held up to Willow Creek's soul. The town's racism wasn't just in the brick or the slurs. It was in the silence, the excuses, the way people looked the other way when Dawson stirred up hate. Marla wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the mastermind. She'd been a pawn, pressured by Dawson to strike at the Nguyen's, to send a message that outsiders weren't welcome. And Eli, caught between love for his mother and the weight of the truth, had carried that secret until it nearly broke him. As the bailiff escorted Eli from the stand, the boy's eyes met his mother's. Marla mouthed something, maybe, "I'm sorry," maybe, "Why?" But Eli looked away, his small frame trembling. The jury watched him go, their faces heavy with the realization that this case wasn't just about a brick anymore. It was about a town, a boy, and a lie that had festered too long. The prosecution called Dawson to the stand next, and the room braced for another explosion. Dawson strode forward, his jaw set, but his eyes betrayed him, nervous, darting, like a man who knew the walls were closing in. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Clara Nguyen, relation to the victims, but just as invested, wasted no time. "Mr. Dawson," she began, her voice like a blade, "can you explain why a 10-year-old boy claims he saw you in a car with Marla Carter the night a hate crime was committed?" Dawson's smile was tight, practiced. The boy's confused. "Kids make things up. I was at home that night, like I told the police." Clara raised an eyebrow, holding up a photo from a traffic camera. "Then why does this image show your car? License plate clear as day. 2 blocks from the Nguyen's house at 11:47 p.m. on June 12th? The gallery buzzed. Dawson's smile faltered, and for the first time he looked small. Clara pressed harder, laying out phone records, witness statements, and a paper trail tying Dawson to Marla. He'd promised her money, she said, to take care of the Nguyen's. Marla, desperate and worn down, had agreed, thinking it would secure a future for Eli. Instead, it had landed her here, facing prison, and Eli in the middle of a firestorm. As Clara dismantled Dawson's lies, Marla sat silent, her hands folded in her lap. She hadn't spoken since Eli's testimony, but her eyes told a story of regret, of a mother who'd made a terrible choice and lost everything. The jury saw it. The Nguyen's saw it. And Eli, now sitting with a social worker in the back, saw it too. The trial stretched into the afternoon, each witness adding another layer to the truth. A neighbor testified about Dawson's late-night visits to Marla's house. A co-worker at the diner recalled Marla's cryptic comments about doing what she had to for Eli. Piece by piece, the case came together, but it was Eli's words that lingered, a wound that wouldn't close. By the time the prosecution rested, the courtroom felt like a held breath. Dawson's defense was shaky, his lawyer scrambling to paint Eli as an unreliable witness. But the jury wasn't buying it. They'd seen the boy's eyes, heard the crack in his voice. They knew truth when they heard it. As the day ended, Judge Voss adjourned the trial until morning. The gallery emptied, but the tension stayed, thick as fog. Outside, protesters shouted, their signs bobbing in the dusk. The Nguyen's left quietly, their hands still clasped. Marla was led away in cuffs, her head bowed. And Eli, guided to a waiting car, looked back at the courthouse, his face unreadable. Willow Creek would never be the same. The trial had exposed its fractures: racism, fear, the lies people told to protect their own. But it had also shown something else, the power of a single voice, even a small one, to break through. Eli's truth had silenced the court, but it had also given the Nguyen's a chance at justice, and the town a chance to heal. The story wasn't over. Dawson's testimony would come next, and with it, more secrets. Marla's fate hung in the balance, and Eli faced a future without the only family he'd ever known. But for now, the boy's words echoed, a reminder that truth, no matter how painful, could set things right. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with a restless energy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Tom Dawson took the stand, his tailored suit crisp but his face haggard, like a man who hadn't slept. The weight of Eli's testimony hung over the room, a shadow no amount of charm could dispel. Clara Nguyen, the prosecutor, stood ready, her notes meticulously arranged, her eyes locked on Dawson like a hunter sizing up prey. Clara began with a question that cut straight to the bone. Mr. Dawson, why would a 10-year-old boy, risking everything, claim you were with his mother the night of the hate crime if it wasn't true? Dawson adjusted his tie, his smile thin and brittle. Kids lie, Ms. Nguyen. Eli's confused, maybe coached. His mother's desperate to save herself, so she's using him to drag me down. The jury stirred, a few exchanging glances. Eli, seated in the back with the social worker, flinched at Dawson's words. His small hands clenched into fists, but he stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Marla, at the defendant's table, didn't react. Her face was a blank slate now, as if she'd retreated somewhere deep inside herself. Clara didn't blink. So you're saying Eli fabricated this story? A boy who, by all accounts, loves his mother and has no reason to lie about you. Objection. Dawson's lawyer, a wiry man named Harold Klein, shot up. Speculative, Your Honor. Sustained, Judge Voss said, her tone sharp. Stick to the facts, Ms. Nguyen. Clara nodded, unfazed, and held up a document. Let's talk facts, then. This is a text message from your phone to Marla Carter, sent 2 days before the incident. It reads, "Do this and I'll make sure you and the kid are set. Care to explain?" Dawson's jaw tightened, but he leaned back, feigning calm. I was helping Marla financially. She was struggling. That's all it meant. Helping her by asking her to commit a felony? Clara's voice was ice-cold. She projected another Imagia bank statement showing a $5,000 transfer from Dawson to Marla the day after the brick incident. This looks like payment, Mr. Dawson. Payment for throwing a brick through the Nguyen's window. The gallery murmured, the sound swelling until Judge Voss banged her gavel. Dawson's composure cracked, his hands gripping the stand. That was for rent, he snapped. She was behind. I'm a landlord, not a criminal. Clara pressed on, relentless. She introduced testimony from a gas station clerk who'd seen Dawson and Marla together the night of the crime, just blocks from the Nguyen's house. She played a voicemail Dawson had left Marla, his voice low and urgent. Just do it quick, Marla. No one will know. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow, chipping away at Dawson's story. The jury's faces hardened disgust, disbelief, and anger settling in. Marla's lawyer, Greg Palmer, tried to redirect the focus, arguing that Marla was coerced, a victim of Dawson's manipulation. My client was under immense pressure, Palmer said in his closing argument. A single mother, targeted by a powerful man who exploited her desperation. She made a mistake, but she's not the mastermind here. The prosecution countered that Marla's actions, coerced or not, had caused real harm. The Nguyens took the stand, their voices steady but heavy with pain. Mrs. Nguyen described the fear of finding the brick, the word leave burning into her memory. Mr. Nguyen spoke of their store, their livelihood, now struggling under the weight of vandalism and boycotts. We came here for a better life, he said, his accent thick but his words clear. Instead, we got hate. Eli listened from the back, his face pale. The social worker, a kind woman named Ms. Rivera, kept a hand on his shoulder, but it did little to ease the storm inside him. He told the truth, but at what cost? His mother faced prison, and his world was crumbling. Yet, as he watched the Nguyens, something shifted in him, a flicker of understanding that his words, painful as they were, might help someone else. The trial's final day was electric. Closing arguments stretched into the afternoon, each side painting a vivid picture. Clara argued that Dawson and Marla had conspired to terrorize the Nguyens, driven by prejudice and greed. Palmer pleaded for leniency, framing Marla as a woman trapped by circumstance. Dawson's lawyer insisted his client was a pillar of the community, unfairly targeted by a biased investigation. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, the longest 6 hours Willow Creek had ever felt. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged black woman named Ruth Bennett, stood tall, her voice steady. On the charge of criminal mischief, we find Marla Carter guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit a hate crime, we find both Marla Carter and Thomas Dawson guilty. The courtroom exhaled, a collective release of tension. Marla's head dropped, her hands covering her face. Dawson's face twisted in fury, his lawyer already whispering about an appeal. The Nguyens embraced, tears streaming down their faces. Eli, still in the back, stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Judge Voss sentenced Marla to 3 years with the possibility of parole. Dawson got 5, his influence and wealth no match for the evidence stacked against him. As they were led away, Marla glanced at Eli one last time, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. Eli didn't meet her gaze. He couldn't, not yet. The aftermath was messy. Willow Creek's wounds didn't heal overnight. Protests continued, some hailing the verdict as justice, others decrying it as a miscarriage. The Nguyens rebuilt their store, slowly regaining customers, but the scars remained. Marla began her sentence, writing Eli letters he wasn't ready to read. Dawson's real estate empire crumbled as his allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be tainted by his conviction. Eli was placed with a foster family, the Thompsons, a kind couple who lived on the edge of town. They gave him a room with a view of the fields, a place to breathe, but he carried the weight of his choice every day. Ms. Rivera checked in weekly, helping him navigate the guilt and anger that churned inside him. "You did something brave," she told him one day, as they sat on the Thompsons' porch. "The truth isn't easy, but it matters." Eli nodded, but the words felt hollow. He missed his mother, even knowing what she'd done. He missed the life they'd had, flawed as it was. But he also felt a strange pride not in her guilt, but in his own courage. He'd stood up, spoken out, and changed things. The Nguyen's had thanked him through their lawyer, a gesture that made his chest ache with something like hope. Months later, Eli visited the Nguyen's store. He hadn't planned to'd been walking, lost in thought, and found himself at their door. Mrs. Nguyen recognized him immediately. She didn't say much, just offered him a soda and a quiet smile. "You're welcome here," she said. It was simple, but it was enough. Willow Creek began to shift, slowly. Community meetings started, led by people tired of the division. Some resisted, clinging to old prejudices, but others listened. The Nguyen's became a fixture at these meetings, sharing their story. Eli, too, found a voice, speaking at a school assembly about what he'd learned, that hate grows in silence, but truth can break it. The town wasn't perfect. It never would be. But Eli's words had sparked something, a reckoning, a chance to rebuild. His mother's letters began to pile up, and one day he opened one. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I was wrong, and you were braver than me." He didn't write back. Not yet, but he kept the letter under his pillow. Years later, as Eli grew into a young man, he'd look back on that courtroom moment as the one that defined him. Not because it was easy, but because it was hard. He'd chosen truth over loyalty, justice over silence, and in doing so, he'd given Willow Creek a mirror to face its flaws. The Nguyen's thrived, their store a cornerstone of the community. Marla, released early for good behavior, worked to rebuild her life, starting with small, painful steps toward her son. The story of Willow Creek isn't just about a brick or a trial. It's about what happens when a community confronts its shadows, when a child's voice cuts through the noise, and when justice, flawed and messy, starts to take root. It's about the cost of truth and the courage it takes to speak it. What do you think? Where does justice end and forgiveness begin? How would you heal a town torn apart by hate?